Oftentimes, an accountant will recommend purchasing a building through a separate holding company. While there can be several legal and succession planning reasons for this, the real benefit is that it allows the users to analyze the purchase of the building as a separate entity, and then to evaluate the purchase decision based on the merits of the business plan as an investment opportunity. A good start is by identifying the costs that the new rental company will have to incur, such as property tax, interest expense, and major repairs. To break even, your revenue will have to cover these expenses, pay the income tax, and the principal payments on the loan. A useful exercise is to compare what the market rate is per square foot of rental space compared to what your break-even amount is. If the discrepancy between the two is too large, then maybe you should look at a different way to invest the company's surplus cash. Projection analysis, an excellent adaptive tool of financial statements are financial statement projections. The projection allows you to take historical data and map out your expected future. It allows you to view the sensitivity of your business to changes in its revenue, cost of sales, and expenses. It also shows you how that will affect your cash flow and your balance sheet ratios on a future basis. Knowing your thresholds and monitoring your business operations is an excellent way to be proactive in your decision-making instead of reactive. Just a reminder, you usually have a lot more options if you can see a problem coming than if you have to react to one that's already occurred. Projections can also help you to get a handle on your cash flow, which is the first thing that usually takes a hit when a major acquisition is made. It can also help you to look at this big picture. Will removing an additional $2,000 a month from my cash flow hurt my company's competitiveness? Will I be tying up too much of my company's lifeblood in a non-liquid, long-term asset? How quickly could I get additional cash if a good opportunity came up? All good questions that projections can at least help us think about. Finally, constraint. If your analysis of the rental business shows that the plan is sound, and your review of the projections show that this is an ideal time to make this type of acquisition, then you should proceed with the purchase of your building. Just remember, don't overdo it. Buying a constructed building reduces the risk of overspending, since more of the variables are defined. You know exactly the size of the property, what type of services it has plumbed into it, and probably even know the property taxes and utility costs associated with this operation. These types of purchases are often less of a quicksand hit, as you know the majority of what you're getting yourself into. Since banks will often loan up to 75% of the value of the property, which means you also have a pretty good idea of what your cash contribution will be, allowing you to plan accordingly. Where most building purchases go astray is when the facility is constructed. I believe that the biggest risk here is the mentality that by spending a little bit today, we can save a lot more in the future. And also the fact that it is an investment. So the add-ons start. And the next thing you know, your $400,000 retail outlet becomes a $1 million supercenter. While both comments that spending a little today can save in the long run, and that building is an investment are true, the real question you should be asking yourself is, can my business afford to invest that far into the future? 9 times out of 10, small business additions occur after the banks approve plans for financing. So what ends up happening is these additions are funded out of working capital. Working capital, of course, being your current assets less your current liabilities. And as you guessed it, what happens next is tight cash flow and possible default of your loan covenants on the horizon. Much of this can be avoided simply by analyzing the rental business in its own bubble, forecasting your financial picture based on the building, the purchase of the building, and making sure that you meet the needs of your business today and not 20 years from now. So what have we learned? Well, I think we all learned that accountants cannot tell jokes. We learned that financial statements aren't black and white. Their true purpose is to describe your business, its structure, its strengths, and its weaknesses. We have learned to think about your business as a living entity. If it is not strong enough, it will get trapped. If it is not healthy enough, it will flounder. And if it does not have enough cash flowing through it, it will seize up and die. The purpose of financial statement analysis is to form questions as to why your business behaves in a certain way, and then, through deeper analysis, to answer those same questions. Regardless of their level of understanding, all users of financial statements start at the entity level and then work their way down into the details. And in doing so, start down the path of understanding their financial statements. Thank you very much.
Our next keynote, by the way, just in case I forget, if I could after Lisa and Greg, if I could check with you on some just for 2 seconds. My next guest, Simon. Simon is a lawyer in Medicine. Simon Hersey is married to Carla and 1 child, Jensen. He's been a lawyer for 6 years with Smith and Hersey. They have a beautiful office in the area, close to the Costco area. How would we, Simon, where's Simon? There we go. What do we call that area? Box Springs. Box Springs. You guys haven't been in his office. We thought we had a nice office until I walked into his office. And so they are such a top great company to do business with as well. Known Simon and Dan for many years, know a lot of their clients. They do incredible things, and he's going to talk about that. But what I can tell you about Simon and Dan and their company is that they are incredible at finding solutions. They're incredibly good at asking you the right questions. If you don't know what to ask, they're incredible at letting you know the things that you need to know about what a lawyer can do. And he's a member of the Alberta and California bars. So please help me welcome Simon Hersey.
So before the summit started, I was chatting with Dan and Rainey. We were wondering who drew the shortest straw. I know having to speak at 1 o'clock after lunch is tough, but for me, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon is about when I start to wish I could have a power nap. But we're going to power through some stuff here. I'm going to hopefully keep you awake, keep the pace going, and we'll hopefully find some interesting points here. So, those of you who are clients of mine know that there's a few conversations I like to have with you regarding your business. These are the same conversations I like to have, or wish I could have had, with those people that sit across my desk, coming to see me for the first time when they're facing a difficult or crisis situation. We're going to talk about 3 of those conversations today. You will notice a common theme in these topics I'm going to be discussing with you. That common theme is certainty. Certainty in your key business relationships. There is enough uncertainty out there without adding to it. As Mr. Tulk was saying earlier, the economy can be uncertain. Your bottom line, your profits in any given month or year can be uncertain. You can do something, though, about your key business relationships. And if we can provide you with certainty in that area, that certainty will provide you with stability. And stability is very important, especially in unsure economic times. So, conversation number 1. Let me tell you about my game plan. And that is the client telling me about their game plan. You telling your legal counsel about your game plan. And every business goes through various stages, and Kent talked a little bit about this. And while not necessarily representative of every business, this chart which I've got here sort of shows a typical development cycle in a business. Very quickly, you've got the wonder stage, where you've got the brand new idea, you're just putting it into practice. There's a sense of purpose about this time. The name of the game is staying alive. You want to get this thing off the ground. This can lead to a stage called the blunder stage. This is where the losers quit because it's just too much hard work. Those who stick to the plan go on to do great things. But this is where the hard work sets in. You're working 12, 13, 14-hour days. You're trying to keep the wolves away from the door. Hopefully this leads to the thunder stage, which is when you start to reap the benefits of your hard work. You start to see this in the lifestyle benefits of success, which come your way, and people start to notice, hey, he's doing all right. Now, in this stage, often some myths can creep in, and again, Kent had mentioned this, the being overprotective about your business, being secretive about it. You're saying, I've worked so hard to get here, I don't want to share it with anybody else. I'm just going to keep going like I'm going. It's a common myth in this stage. And as things go on, you might get to the plunder stage where you have a decision to make. Are you going to get your second wind and go hard at it again? Are you going to close up shop, sell out, that sort of thing? Are you going to retire? Are you going to teach somebody else? That manager that comes along can make life easy for you. You can still be the owner, but they run the show, that sort of thing. That's just a very brief overview. A common fault that we all have, those of us in business, is we don't take time to make, stick to, or modify the plan. We're so busy surviving the day, surviving the week, surviving the month, or even maybe surviving the year, that we don't take time to do this. The problem is, if you don't know where you're at and where you're going, it's going to be hard to plan for the future. Your advisors are going to have a hard time planning without knowing these things as well. So you say to me, how can I possibly keep track of all of these factors? The good news is you don't have to keep track of these factors alone. Your job is to plan. It is the job of your advisors to put the meat on the bones of that plan and come up with the details. You say to me, well, everybody and their uncle is an advisor these days. And it's true there are a lot of so-called experts out there. But when it comes to experts and advisors, I have a very simple rule. Does your team of advisors, or does your advisor in particular that you're thinking about, add value to your business? If they don't, it's time to get a new advisor. Now, more than likely, you guys have somebody in your life you can think of who's an advisor, whether it's a tax accountant, a lawyer, investment advisor, what have you, who you click very well with and is doing a good job. They probably have access to other advisors in other areas to help you build this team. Having this team is an important thing. So come up with the plan. Your advisors are there to help you put the meat on the bones. So why is this important? It's important because it leads to this issue of certainty again. If you don't know where you're at and where you're going, your advisors are not going to know where you're at and where you're going. Your legal needs in the wonder stage are very different than your legal needs in the plunder stage. The tax issues you face in the wonder stage are very different than the tax issues you're looking at if you're looking at retirement, and you have to plan ahead to get this stuff in order. So, certainty. Certainty in your key business relationships. Your advisors are key business relationships. Certainty or uncertainty, there's enough of it out there without adding to it, and certainty provides you with stability. So, advisors are not evidences of weakness. Advisors are the answer to the ever more complex business environment that we live in. So, conversation number one. Conversation number two. Planning for the unexpected. Planning to, or failing to plan, may be akin to planning to fail, but planning to fail is not the same thing as planning for the unexpected. I think it's a very prudent thing to plan for the unexpected. The problem with planning for the unexpected is it's like finally getting around to doing your will, your power of attorney, and your personal directive. If you go home and around the kitchen table while you're having dinner say, honey, if I'm in a coma or persistent vegetative state, and in the opinion of my physician have no known hope of regaining awareness, I want comfort measures only to relieve pain and not to prolong my life. You'll probably be accused of being overly morbid, But nobody for a minute would suggest that you don't get that done. It's got to be done. It's not everyday kitchen table, boardroom table conversation, but it still should be done. So planning for the unexpected can be kind of like that as well. I'm going to give you 2 examples of planning for the unexpected. Okay? The first one is a creditor proofing liability mitigating strategy, and Dan touched on this earlier in his presentation as well. These creditor proofing and liability mitigating strategies are extremely important, but even more so in those bet the farm or bold move periods in your business, when you are taking those major risks. Without great risk, you could say you don't get much reward. So there are going to be those stages in your business where you're making those risks. And it's obviously a calculated risk. So talking to your legal counsel and your accountant counsel 2 months before you are anticipating a cash crunch and a possible insolvency situation is not going to help you. You've got to have these things in order well before you get to that spot. So if you're planning one of those moves, then come talk to us. So here's a simple example. Your holding company and your operating company. Your holding company owns your land, your buildings, your equipment, and maybe other important assets. Your operating company is the one out there on the front lines, doing the deals, talking with the customers, doing the work. In the event of a lawsuit against your business comprising these 2 separate companies, the lawsuit is going to be against your operating company, because they're the ones that did the deal, they're the ones dealing with the customers. In the event things go badly, worst case scenario, operating company goes bankrupt. That's the bad news. The good news is your land, your buildings, your equipment, and other important assets that you may have are still owned by your holding company. If this thing is done correctly and carried out well, then at the end of the day, you still own your holding company and you can start again. So that's an example of a simple creditor-proofing liability mitigating strategy. But you have to have this stuff lined up prior to problems. The second second example of planning for the unexpected I want to touch on is the shareholders agreement. If you own your own business, it's just you. You might even have some employees, but you're your own boss. You're the sole shareholder of your company. You're the only person that really runs the show. Life is fairly simple because you don't have many people to answer to, except maybe your significant other when you start piling business stuff in your basement. But if you are in business with somebody, whether it's a partner in a partnership, so there's more than one of you, or you've got multiple shareholders in a company, the biggest thing you can do to provide yourself with certainty is to have the shareholders agreement, unanimous shareholders agreement, or USA as Dan called it. A shareholders agreement is basically a contract, as you can see on the screen, between the individual shareholders. You may have a shareholder who is the owner. You may have a shareholder who is an investor. They're just the money person. They don't work really for the company, but they're still a shareholder. You may have a shareholder who's the manager. You may have an employee shareholder, just as an example. Think of your shareholders agreement as an insurance policy, in that it provides certainty upon the happening of certain unforeseen events that might come up. You can also think of a shareholders agreement as like a prenup. Going into business with people is very much like a marriage in that it is a long-term relationship and it has relational consequences. It becomes very difficult for shareholders of a company to separate their affairs in the event that they want to. So, much like a prenup, a shareholders agreement sets out how individuals are to behave and the manner in which disputes can be settled before they become a problem. Okay? And as Dan mentioned, this is a very underutilized tool. I would say less than 40% of the companies we represent have a shareholders agreement. And it is a very useful tool, especially when you are facing uncertain times and facing the unexpected. So, here's some examples of where a shareholders agreement might help out. You have two college buddies who go into business together. And I'm basing these on actual situations that I've dealt with. Two college buddies go into business together, and they get along fine, so they figure there's no need for a shareholders agreement. However, after a couple years, the business starts to be successful. One of the guys starts drinking too much, hits the bottle too hard. At first, it's not a big deal, but then after a year or so, it really starts to affect his performance in the business. He's showing up late, he's dragging the thing down, he's really not pulling his weight. If you do not have a shareholder agreement in that situation, separating those two individuals is going to be very difficult. Now, the friend who is still the hard worker, he's looking at some severe uncertainty at this point. How am I going to continue this thing with this guy, stuck to my coattails and I'm basically dragging him along? If there was a shareholders agreement with, for example, say a shotgun buy-sell provision in it, while not perfect, the hard-working friend who still wants to continue with the business has a way to get rid of this guy, or at the very least, a way to get himself out of the business and get some of his money out of it. So, provides him with a bit of certainty, or otherwise, his future and the future of the business will be very uncertain. Second example, two sisters going into business. In their late 30s, they've always gotten along since they were kids, so they figured no need for a shareholders agreement. They work in their business for more than 10 years, and they're quite successful. They enjoy working with each other, and when they do have a dispute, they always seem to be able to work it out between themselves and not too much problem. However, one of the sisters decides she wants to move on and do something else. The sister who wants to move on, we'll call her Sister A, has a daughter who just graduated with an art history degree and is looking for a job. So she tells her sister, Sister B, I'm leaving, I'm retiring, but I want my daughter to come in and replace me in the business. I'm basically selling her my half of the company. Now, if you're Sister C, you might be a little bit concerned, especially if you know that this daughter, your niece, has a reputation of not being a hard worker, maybe a bit lazy. Even if she is a hard worker, she doesn't know the business. You and your sister have been working on this business for years. You're the experts. Now all of a sudden you've got a 50% basically partner who is going to want 50% share of the profits, who isn't worth 50% of the profits. So we have a situation here which provides some uncertainty for Sister B who wants to stick around. Is she going to have to be in business with this girl? Is it going to work out? So if they had had a shareholders agreement, and the shareholders agreement had, say, a right of first refusal clause in it, the minute that Sister A wants to sell her side of the business to her daughter, Sister B has the option of buying it. Now, she may decide she doesn't want to, but it provides her with some certainty. She can buy the whole thing, sell the whole thing to somebody else, or there's a lot of options she could use. But there's just two examples of where having a shareholders agreement, planning for the unexpected, can provide some certainty. Other issues that we like to deal with in a shareholders agreement, the issues are numerous, but let me just touch on a couple here, which I commonly put in a shareholders agreement for one of my main clients. When it comes to a key employee, sort of say the shareholder employee, if you're bringing an employee in as a shareholder, and I'm going to get to that again, or get to that a bit later in my topic, bringing an employee as a shareholder. One of the things you're going to want to see is a duty to not compete against the company. So in a shareholders agreement, you've got a shareholder employee, you'll often see a non-competition clause. If you ever leave us, you cannot go and within the same city compete against us, because we've seen that happen a lot of times. Procedure for breaking deadlock. If you have a board of directors, that's an even number of people, say 4, and you have a deadlock, 2 against 2, how are you going to resolve that deadlock? Is the business going to just stay in limbo and nothing get done, or are you going to have a process to break that deadlock? You'll also see provisions in there regarding certain major decisions. If you have a shareholder investor, say, who isn't involved in the day-to-day operation of the business, but has a significant amount of money invested in the company, they're going to want to keep a tab on what's going on. They may not be on the board of directors, but certain major decisions that the company is going to make, such as buying a large building, or bringing in another partner, spending more than a certain amount of money, say $30,000, that shareholder investor may want to be involved in those decisions. So we have these things called major decisions. Anytime a major decision is made, a shareholders agreement will often say everybody has to be involved. Initial and continued funding. A shareholders agreement often sets out where the initial seed money is coming from and how it's going to get paid back. Investor shareholder is going to want his seed money back before anybody else gets a bonus. Well, if that's the case, let's put that in writing, so 5 years down the road, we don't have an argument as to what was really said and agreed to. What about additional money? If additional money is needed to buy more capital assets, are we going to go to the bank, or are we going to ask the shareholders to ante up? These are all issues that we can put in there. A big one is going to be a dispute resolution clause. I always put an arbitration clause in the shareholders agreement. The last thing that you want is the manager shareholder suing everybody else for whatever reason. We like to keep people out of court. That's my job. So what we have is an arbitration clause that says, if in the event of a dispute between the shareholders, it's dealt with this way, and then the decision of the arbitrator is binding and final. And we've kept a lot of people out of months of litigation that way. So, why would you deal with the issue of dealing with the unexpected, whether it's through some strategy like creditor proofing or having a shareholders agreement? It's because it provides certainty again. So there's enough uncertainty out there without adding to it. Certainty will provide you with stability, and stability is a very important thing in uncertain times. Conversation number 3. Let's talk employment issues. I once had a client sit across my desk from me and say, if it wasn't for HR issues, I would enjoy being in business. And managing your HR issues will always take some effort, but it's an essential part of being in business if you have employees. Okay? And I want to touch on 2 topics. One, because it seems to affect the vast majority of my clients, so I'm hoping it will help you guys out. And secondly, because I seem to be asked a lot of questions about the second topic. The first one is termination of employees. The second one is incentivizing your employees, and incentivizing them specifically through stock options. So, first topic. When it comes to terminating employees, there's essentially 2 ways to do it. You terminate them for cause, which means they did something bad, so they're gone. Or you terminate them without cause. You just don't need them around anymore, so you let them go. If you terminate an employee without cause, the law says you've got to give them proper notice. If you have a 5-year manager working for you, you can't give them 2 weeks' notice. So what proper notice is a very complex thing. It's something you have to deal with your legal counsel. I don't want to get into that point today. What I want to get into is this idea of terminating for cause and the need for progressive discipline. So gone are the days where you can bring somebody into your office and say, you're fired, and out the door they go because they did something wrong. There's no more easy terminations. The law is very employee-sided these days. Judges look for reasons to make a determination that somebody was terminated improperly. So you need some help as you navigate this minefield. The name of the game these days is progressive discipline. If you take one thing away from this talk, take this one thing away, progressive discipline. Here's an example of progressive discipline. Johnny is habitually late for work. So after a while, you bring him into your office and you say, Johnny, you're habitually late for work. This is unacceptable. It's not fair to the other employees who are here on time. And your employment agreement says you show up at 8. You're showing up at 20 after 8. It's not going to work. Johnny goes back to work. You put a note in Johnny's HR file. On this date, we had a conversation about his habitual lateness. The habitual lateness doesn't go away, so you bring him into your office a second time. You hand him a letter. The letter says, You're being habitually late. This is unacceptable. You need to modify your behavior. If it continues, you're going to be terminated. Johnny goes back to work. You put the letter in the file.